Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's DFIR webcast. Android versus iOS, Battle of the Smartphones, Data Retention. My name is Benjamin White with the SANS Institute, and I'll be moderating this webcast. Today's featured speaker is Heather Mahalik, SANS Certified Instructor and Senior Digital Forensics Analyst at Basis Technology. During the presentation, if you have any questions for Heather, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface. At this point, I would like to hand the presentation over to Heather Mahalik.
Hello, everyone. First, I want to apologize for the last time when I had to postpone this talk due to the stomach bug. Now I'm fighting a cold, so I also apologize if my voice sounds weird or if you hear me taking sips of my water to get through this. Like Ben said, interrupt me at any point with questions. I think it's easier to answer them as we go along versus at the end. So if it's about the slide I'm talking about, we can reference it right there. The slide that's in front of you, the next time this course is taught is actually with Paul Henry next week. I believe there are still some seats available if anyone wants a last-minute ad. But after that, we will see you in Monterey, where Cindy Murphy and I will be co-teaching for the first time. So I hope to see you at one of the courses. So what we're going to cover today, this is the battle of Android versus iOS. I only have an hour, so I'm hoping to cover as much as I can. And if you have more questions after the fact or you want to learn a little more, we hope to see you in 585. Or you're welcome to email me. My information will be on the last slide. And you will have access to these slides after the fact. So what we're going to cover is how Android and iOS store application data, how the acquisition method will affect your examination and what you can actually pull from each device. Forensic handling will also matter. Methods to recover deleted data, especially if your forensic tool misses it. So we're going to dive a little bit deep in this just to touch on things that you should know as a forensic examiner if you're looking at smartphones. Hopefully some things that you don't know and you'll learn. And to become more of an expert and actually get hands-on with it, you'll have to attend the course. So overall, application storage, where is the user data stored? SQLite is used by these smart devices. The active databases will contain deleted data. So that's one thing to know. Even if you aren't getting a full physical acquisition, which we'll talk about, you still may be able to recover deleted data, which is different than normal mobile device forensics. Before, we always taught you that in order to get deleted data, you have to have a physical acquisition. This is no longer true for smartphone forensics, and I will dive deeper into that as the talk goes on. But just so you know that SQLite stores application data. It makes a small footprint, and it's great for mobile devices. The database grows in size to support the data requirements, so it's not set by default. So you may find a huge amount of deleted data still residing in these files. So iOS devices differ slightly from Android in the fact that they use property lists, which are calledplists, and SQLite databases to store the application data. By default, on non-jailbroken devices, I want to just use that as a little disclaimer here, you should be able to find application data in the library folder and under the documents. So here, I'm showing on the left-hand side here under the library, you can see I'm showing an example of Dropbox. There's a database file there that you could actually examine in any forensic tool of your choice. You could examine it in SQLite browser. So there's lots of options out there. So just remember, the library and documents should store your information relating to applications on iOS devices. For Android, SQLite databases are also used. The preference files, instead of using plist information here like iOS, they'll use XML, and you can examine those as well. The application files are in individual subdirectories under the root of the data partition. So if you look here in the screenshot, you can see the data partition, and then underneath you can see all the COM folders. So COM Amazon, you would see Facebook, anything else that they're using listed as a COM file, and there's a folder for each. When we dive into each section, I will actually go into where to look in each partition. For the student or the person that's asking, the microphone is muted, can't seem to get audio. Can you hear me? If you can, will you type yes? Good to go? Okay, good. You shouldn't be able to speak into the microphone. You should just be able to type your questions in. I should be the only one that you can hear at this point. Okay, so now we're going to start with Android and talk about application storage, and then we'll branch into iOS. And then the final section will actually cover just third-party apps in general and how they actually are the same for the battle. So your forensic acquisition does matter. And I also mentioned that forensic handling does matter. What I mean by that is if your device is in your hands and you do not use a Faraday solution and your device is white, then that will actually render your data useless. So that's what I mean by forensic handling. If you alter the data or allow someone to remotely access the device while it's in your hand, it will affect your acquisition. Your acquisition method that will matter here. So if you do a logical, file system, or physical, a logical is simply giving you a report. If you're lucky, you will get some access to attachments and maybe some access to raw material. So logical right here will give you the least amount for your examination. Your file system will get your data on your SD card. Remember this will actually matter. So if you do simply a logical acquisition, you will miss application information stored on the SD card. You'll also get access to the raw data files. Some of the data will be decoded. Some of the deleted data may be present but not parsed. I will talk to you about how to do that. And then ultimately, the best case scenario is your physical acquisition, because you have the raw image file, you have access to all partitions. Some of it may be reconstructed for you, and some of it may be analyzed. But assuming it's not, I'm going to talk to you about how to do all this manually on your own. So for physical acquisition, what's obtained? You can see here, you'll get a reconstructed file system, and I have a star there. What that means is this is Physical Analyzer right here. The reconstructed file system, it's going to put it into a normalized format for you. So if it knows that something should be called the data partition, it's actually going to call it data. So you'll see here, the no name 0 is usually your SD card. So it doesn't call it SD card. It does the best it can, but it's not going to give you everything that you need without knowing which partitions store which data, essentially. So you're getting access to your data partition, your system partition, your SD card, and then others that are required by the Android to function. Deleted data will be recovered, but it may not be all inclusive. So when I'm going through these slides coming up, just keep in mind your tool may parse some. If you see some deleted data, do not assume it's parsing all, especially from applications. And decrypted data may not be supported on all devices. So keep in mind decryption and encryption will affect your acquisition. For file system, you get access to the external partition, which is the SD card, and that is shown right here. And you can see on this card, actually in this example, you can see that it has BlackBerry on it. This was my old SD card that I used in a BlackBerry and then transferred to my Android. So you can see traces of old devices on the current device. You will get access to the data partition, which is this HTC Android Incredible partition right here. Some of the data will be decoded, but the most important thing to remember here is that you get access to the raw files, and that's what we want. So that is the most important thing. When you're acquiring a device, however you acquire it shouldn't matter as long as you get access to the raw files in the data partition, because we want to actually manually carve these to ensure our tool is not missing anything and that we're getting all the data. For logical, I'm sure most of you have done logical acquisitions. If you haven't, essentially it's pulling what the user sees and is giving you access to the native files that are used on phones. So if anything's deleted, it's not going to normally be parsed for you, but it does not mean it's not there. So if you have a tool, so right here I'm showing Physical Analyzer, XRY and Oxygen will also pull files that they'll put in. For example, XRY puts it in an unrecognized folder. If you can get access to the raw database, you can pull deleted data from a logical acquisition. It just depends on your tool and what it will parse. So Physical Analyzer does it in a folder called Databases, which I will show you in a few slides later. And Oxygen also gives you access to the raw databases. So if you're using a tool such as those three, you should have access to raw data through a logical acquisition and be able to actually pull out deleted data on your own. All right, this is a busy slide here. Evidentiary locations on an Android device. So a few things to see here. You can see the root directory, and then you have your application, cache, your data, your SD card, and your system. The most important information that you are going to need for your forensic examination will reside in the data partition, the cache partition, and then also on the SD card. A lot of people forget that the SD card will contain unique information that is not stored on the device itself, that will contain unique application information. So I'll go through in the next few slides what actually matters and what you need to know. But as an overview, this is a good place. This lists all the directories where you should look, where data is stored that may affect your investigation. All right, so understanding data on devices. Yes.
We had a question 2 slides back about which acquisition tool were you showing?
Oh, I actually see that. Okay, so 2 slides back. Let's see. In this one?
Yes.
This is actually Physical Analyzer. I did a logical acquisition and then just open the Android and Physical Analyzer. So you can see it's just giving me access to the attachments and then all the analyzed data. This is what you would see in the standard HTML report. Does that answer your question? Thank you, Ben. Okay, so before we dive deeper into, so we just talked about logical acquisition back here and what it pulls. One thing that these smart devices do is as you use more and more applications, they try to link everything for you to make your life easier as a user. It makes it faster. So I'm sure many of you have looked at your calendar on your smartphone and think, why is so-and-so from Facebook, why is their birthday in my calendar? I didn't save it there. What the application is doing, when you install it, it asks you, can it access your calendar? Can it access your contact? And is actually syncing those for you. So this may be good for a user, it may be annoying for a user, but it's bad for forensic examiners if you do not understand that concept. So this slide right here is showing in the COM Android providers contacts database, this is where the contacts are stored. All of the contacts that are listed here under contacts 2, these ones that I'm circling here that are kind of grayed out, those were actually Facebook contacts. It has their Facebook picture. I did not save those people to my phone. The same thing happened in Skype. So with Skype, if you even search for a Skype user, it will automatically save all the other ones that are associated or close to the one you're searching with as a deleted contact. So if you're searching for Heather M on Skype, it may show you Heather M2, Heather M13, all the ones. So if it lists hundreds, all those hundreds suggestions will be stored as deleted contacts. Even though you never connected with that person, you never wanted to, it may be stored there. So it's something that you need to understand. Facebook artifacts that are usually affected are the calendar and contacts. Those will be stored into both your database files if you opt to do that when you install the application. And then again, you may see multiple instances of the same file. So you may see Becky and this contact information listed in Facebook, in my contacts, and if she were also a Skype friend or another third-party app friend, you would see her there. So just make sure you understand how the data got there so that if someone's accused of something in your investigation and it's simply a Skype contact, it does not mean that the user connected with that person unless you can prove it. The best way to do this is to attend a course like 585 where we teach you how to prove that, or to get a test device, actually load the application you're interested in, try to follow the same footsteps that the person or that you're investigating has possibly done, and prove or disprove how the data got there. But just be cautious on smartphones because some of the stuff that they do and how they sync the data with the applications may be confusing. Okay, so question is, how can you differentiate those real contacts from app-suggested contacts? Excellent question. So on Facebook, it will list it at, if you look at the metadata, it will actually list it as a Facebook artifact. Skype is a little trickier. So Skype, it automatically just deletes them in the database file, but if you look at the metadata, it will say that it was Skype associated. The issue is with Skype, it doesn't say if the person actually connected with that person and then deleted it. So that's one thing where you'd have to get a test device and test that. But with Skype, what I would say is if it's a deleted Skype contact and you're manually recovering it from a database file, I would say it's likely that the person was connected with this person or that Skype suggested it, just to cover your tracks. Now, if it shows any communication to and from that person in the Skype main database file, then you can say with certainty that the person did communicate with Heather Mahalik at some point, and then they may have deleted that contact. But if there's no communication traffic, it's likely that it was just a suggestion. Okay, so another question here. Recycle or destroy old phones. If we do a factory reset and destroy the SIM card memory cards, is that enough? Or should we destroy the old phones instead of recycling them? Excellent question. I actually upgraded yesterday from my really old iPhone 4S to a 5S. And I did wipe the device after I did a file system dump for 585 for research. And I will say that on newer devices, if you wipe them, if you can actually physically acquire them and make sure nothing's on it, I vote for recycling them. There's no need to destroy them. You can turn them in. A factory reset through the device, so if you go into the general settings on your iPhone or on your Android and you just reset all data or wipe it, it truly is, it's not overwriting all your data, but it's rendering it useless. So even if you physically acquire it, you should not be able to find any of your user data. But I am a paranoid person, so I always test that first before I just hand over my phone. You may want to do the same, but it depends on the device. But for newer smartphones, you should be fine doing a Find My iPhone or an Android device finder and wiping it, or using the phone itself to wipe it. Okay, so moving on to third-party communications. The third-party apps are great for users because you do not require a data plan. You can simply use Wi-Fi. They're great for examiners who want to do testing because, again, you don't need a data plan. You can use Wi-Fi, get these apps, use these apps. You can buy minutes and actually make phone calls and store all this data. The issues with them is that they mask communications and they store data in databases that we as forensic examiners aren't used to examining. So remember, you have to examine all the data within the application folders, not just in the call logs. So if I'm using Skype to do calls, that data may be stored in the call logs, but other data may also not be there. So you have to always examine the application folder. And it will require manual decoding. I will tell you, even if your tool, so if you use Physical Analyzer, XRY, Oxygen, IEF, your tool will probably miss some of the data. So even if it's not, you should know manually how to go in and verify your information. So if you ever have to testify to it or defend it, you can say, I know how my tool is working. Here's where you find the data. So on Android devices, the application data is stored in two locations: on the NAND flash memory, on the handset itself, and externally on the SD card, or on the eMMC card, which is just the emulated media card that's stored as a separate partition on the device itself. So if it's on the device, it's in the data folder, and if it's on the SD card, it's in the MNT folder. If you find an application of interest, make sure you examine both of these locations. I'm going to give you an example here in a few slides that show how if you only looked in the data folder, you would have missed valid information for one app on the MMT folder. So make sure you know you have to examine both. And by default, applications are not required to store in the data folder on Android devices, but most of them do. So if you thought that the user was using some kind of anti-forensic tool, you should do a keyword search across the entire piece of media if possible to make sure you're not missing it if it's not in the data folder. Here's a layout representation of how the data is stored on these Android devices for applications. So in the data folder, you can see there is an application folder for each. And again, these are called like COM, Android, Katana, Facebook. So you'll actually see each folder represents an application in itself. The two directories that you need to worry about the most are the cache and the databases. This is where all the user information, all their preferences should be stored. If any login information is available, any graphics or anything associated to that application that the user created will be stored here. Unfortunately, I cannot list for you every single database for each application that you need to examine because a firmware update may affect it. If someone's using Facebook for Android versus just Facebook, that may affect where the data is stored, but these two directories will house the information that you need to examine. All right, so an example for you. So I chose Zedge, pretty generic application. You can get graphics and wallpapers and ringtones from it. So when I examined Zedge on my own Android device, it appeared to be present on the flash memory and the SD card. So then I was looking at to determine which data is relevant. Why is it stored in both locations? And I'm going to show you why in a second here. But you can see that in the NAND, it was stored in the data and then a .NET Zedge Android folder. And on the SD card, it was in the MNT Zedge. So the screenshot here on the left, this is the NAND flash memory. And on the right, this is the SD card. So you can see under .NET Zedge, I'm looking in the databases. You can see multiple database files here. So we have the Google Analytics, the WebView Cache, Zedge, Zedge Cache, and even some of the journal files you will want to examine, just to make sure that something's not residing in there that matters to you. On the right, you can see under a Zedge folder, I had cache, ringtones, wallpapers, and backup. And you can see a backup temp was deleted. These are all also areas you want to examine as well. So now we're going to dig into each of them. So in Zedge, in the database view, so if you look, I'm over here and I'm looking at the web view in the Zedge database file here. So I'm looking at Zedge, and if you're ever curious as to where you are, if you're losing kind of your footing on where you are in your examination, this is Physical Analyzer here. And Physical Analyzer will actually list the database file that you're in at the top where I'm highlighting here. So if you're ever lost and you're not sure which one you examine, you can see it's Zedge, and I'm looking at it right here. So once you're in the database view, you have to go through each of the tables, which sometimes there might be 5, sometimes there might be 100. And that's not a fun process, but I strongly suggest examining all the tables first that you know contain data, and then going into ones that may contain data and just validating your results, just doing a quick glance over them. So here I'm looking at the favorites. So this user, which was myself, stored one favorite item in this Zedge database file. So you can see here the title is Android versus Apple, and the description, Android eating an apple. However, the actual file itself is not there. So to get to the file itself, which is Android versus Apple, I had to actually go to my SD card and look at it. So here's the image view on the right-hand side of the Android eating the apple. Kind of a gruesome picture. For those of you who like the battle of Android versus iOS, I thought this was kind of relevant. And you can see that it ties it together. So to do this, I looked at the database file, and then I actually went to my SD card, and in the pictures you can see the image view, and right here you can see Android versus iOS, which was a wallpaper. So you have to show it. Essentially, in this application, the NAND was storing the pointer to the file stored on the SD card. This isn't true for all applications, so each will vary in different ways. If you're looking at Facebook, for example, it may be completely different. All the data may be on the NAND, and you may have nothing on the SD card. So it's application dependent, it's how it functions, and it's also how the user chooses to download it and install it. So this is just a simple example here of linking between the two devices. More on Zedge, you can see here you will also have ringtones. Please don't make fun of my ringtones. So American Hero is shown here on the right, and you can actually see the XF data associated with it. So if your application asks you if you want to allow location information, you should expect some sort of coordinates. So if this were a picture, and I actually took it myself, coordinates may be available that could be mapped to show location information. In this instance here, it's just showing you the name and creation dates and time and last access. So this probably wouldn't be relevant to your investigation, but it's just an example that shows you how it may be. So don't forget, not only do you have to examine the application data, but if you have any pictures or videos or media files, you want to also examine the metadata associated with it. So any other questions on Android before I jump into iOS? I know that was a quick overview on the application data on Android. At the end, I'm going to kind of pull them all together again. So hopefully, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt or ask at the end. I see a question here. Is there a standard DoD wipe level you should perform? I'm not aware of one on phones. Definitely on your SD cards, you should do that. And I personally wouldn't turn in an SD card or recycle it. I always just hang on to those just because you never know when you'll need it again. But I am not aware of a DoD wipe level for smart devices. If anyone else is, please chime in and let us know. But usually just the standard wipe that comes with it is good enough for anyone, because they're going to have to activate the phone and either restore an image or start fresh. They're not going to be able to restore your data and use it as if it were you. And then there's another statement. I think there's a technique to mark bad blocks as good with a modified Android kernel. So Joshua, I assume you're referring to if someone wipes it and a block is marked bad, you can make them marked good again. But I don't think that when the standard factory device option to wipe is set, that it marks a block bad. Is that what you're referring to there? Sorry, there's a lot of questions coming in. Let me see if I can find Joshua's there. So someone mentioned DoD has a certified wipe process for flash media. Will a keyword search, for example, SMS data, get good hits across various SMS apps? It depends on how the data is stored. So some of the data may be stored 7-bit encoded, and if it's stored 7-bit on the standard Android for SMS, then it wouldn't hit on application data as a generic search if it doesn't store it that way. Some of the tools will pull any chatting that you're doing or any texting that you're doing back and forth and put it in that database for you with a link to the raw file. But the best practice is to actually go into that application folder and look for the SMS data natively and make sure that you're getting it. Okay, Josh, good that that was answered. For 3LM or Knox, any difference? I'm not sure what that's in reference to. So if you want to type what you're meaning there, that would be great. There are some more questions coming in. Is it true in older iPhones a factory reset will retain deleted data for parsing? So Reza, excellent question. I was actually looking at an article today and tweeted it. So for iPhone 3 devices, so anything that was running the iPhone OS 3, apparently it is true that you can recover some user deleted data if the device is wiped, and that can be restored. I unfortunately do not have any devices running that low of an iOS firmware to test. We have tested it on iPhone 3GS and later, and we were not able to recover deleted data on those. So if someone is still using the original iPhone or iPhone 3, it is likely that you may be able to recover data. I know that Lee Reber released a white paper at some point talking about how he was able to recover address book from iPhone 3s. So you may want to reference that, but on newer smart devices, you're not going to be able to. So a question from Robert, encryption. Could you comment on encryption for phones? When will we have full encryption like we do for laptops? It's a really good question. anytime it seems like a device comes out and says they're fully encrypted, there always ends up being a workaround. Right now, the hardest devices to get into, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the full device being encrypted, are the Apple devices using the A5 or the A5, A6, and A7 chips, but it's just how they're laid out and we can't get access to them. So I'm not sure about a device being fully encrypted and when we should expect to see that. I'm hoping never, but you know it will occur. We honestly can only hope that there's a method for us to get forensic access to it so it doesn't keep us out as examiners. Windows Mobile right now is the hardest to get into. I know that has nothing to do with this talk at all, but BlackBerry, the encryption on BlackBerry is probably the truest that keeps us from getting in. The way the BlackBerry locks down their devices with a hardware key and then a software key is what keeps us from even doing JTAG and chip-off methods to get access to the raw data. But for iPhone and Android, I don't know when it's going to occur, if it's going to occur, and if it's ever going to keep us out. So I'm sorry I can't fully answer that question. I'm trying to sort through. So Michael's pointing out here, No is the new Samsung security for the Note 3 for Android. Someone's asking, how can NSA implants be made visible? I cannot comment on that, nor do I know. I have not researched that. How do you recommend acquiring micro SD cards on Android device? Through the device itself or separately? To be honest, if you have time, and we teach this in a class, do both. I know that's asking a lot, but for time, you would want to remove the SD card if you can and acquire it separately using FTK, FTK Imager, Encase, whatever you prefer. Preferably not a smartphone forensic tool just for the sake of speed. However, if you keep the SD card in the device, it's nice to parse the data and look at the data all inclusively. So if you acquire using FTK and you get a DD image or an EO1 image, it's not going to be able to put itself into Physical Analyzer or XRY or Oxygen for analysis. So that's why I prefer both. However, when I get a smartphone dump, if I get a raw image, I always load it into my normal forensic tools. So I'm a fan of Encase. I load it in Encase. You can load it in FTK, and you should be able to look at your raw images that way as well. So Zachary, if speed matters, do it separately. But if you have the time, also do the SD card in the device. Now keep in mind, some of these Androids have up to 64 gig SD cards, so that will take some time if you pull it through the device, which will slow down your acquisition. So Edward is stating, we haven't moved into iOS yet. Encrypted user file system started with iOS 4, and Android operating system encryption is not an option. It's not default. So essentially you can download something that would possibly encrypt your operating system on Android, but it's not default by the phone itself. Okay, I am going to continue now with iOS. So these slides are going to be laid out very similarly. The acquisition, again, will affect what you get. So logical, file system, and physical are the options. Logical is essentially getting access to a backup file. So any of the vendors can tell you they're doing something slightly different. They may try to get a little bit more, and some of them will. So example, if you use Lantern on a Macintosh to acquire an iOS device, it does pull more database files than a standard backup file will give you. That's one of the few that I have seen so far. All the other tools essentially give you the same thing as a backup. They just give it to you in a better format and provide some analyzed data for you. The file system, I'm going to talk about what the Apple File Condition and backup services mean. And your physical image is your raw image of the file. One thing to note, when you physically acquire an iOS device, it does not give you access to unallocated space. It will only give you access to what it can decrypt. So if there's encrypted unallocated space that is not and able to be decrypted by the tool, you are not going to get access to that as a user. So this is not a true physical acquisition that we're used to if we talk about bit by bit image. It's just something that you need to be aware of. Brett has a question here. Has anyone compared using mass storage dump versus encase to examine SD cards? I personally have not done that. I don't know if the audience can see the questions, and if anyone has, if they want to answer Brett directly, they can. Brett, what I use to examine SD cards, I've used FTK Imager, FTK, Encase. I've used X-Ray and Physical Analyzer. Those are the tools that I have used to examine it. So question, does that depend on whether the iPhone is locked or unlocked to get access to the encrypted files? Excellent question. So I'm going to break down in the next few slides here, Donald, the answers to that, I hope. And if I don't answer it, just let me know. So if the device is locked, how does it affect your acquisition? So physical acquisition gives you access to the raw partitions. It will recover some deleted data for you. Again, you're going to have to go in and manually recover the rest. It should decrypt data for you. Now, the email messages and passwords. So this area right here, Donald, this is what's affected if the device is locked and you cannot get the passcode. So if you're using a tool that can bypass the passcode and give you acquisition results in the form of a raw dump, it will usually tell you if it cannot get the passcode, it's going to miss email and passwords. So those are the two areas that are mainly affected. It will not get access to any unallocated space that it cannot decrypt. So if it's searching the key bag for encryption files and trying to pair up each one, anything that's in that unallocated space that cannot be decrypted, it won't even present it to you because you're not going to be able to decrypt it yourself. The issue is we can't say what's in that space definitively because we don't have access to it to say what we're missing. So this is where having a test device really comes into play. Most of the smartphone forensic vendors are doing a great job on these tools. So they're able to tell you if you look in their guide what it's missing. Most of them now just flat out say email and passwords will not be provided to you. And it's telling you flat out what it's missing. The main difference usually, if it's a simple passcode, so 4 digits, it can usually be bypassed. If it's complex passcodes, it's a little bit harder. Everything changed though with the A5 chip. So for iPhone 4 and below, physical acquisition's easy. You can get past the passcode. For iPhone 4S through the latest ones, it's a little more difficult unless you have the passcode. Another question, so if an application has app data protection enabled, then those files won't be presented then. Unfortunately, for this answer, it depends on the application and depends on the device. On an iPhone 4, for example, I ran Tango, and Tango was parsed completely on iPhone 4. I downloaded it from the App Store, didn't ask it to do any kind of encryption. I installed it on my 4S and dumped the phone, and everything was encrypted in that database file. So it depends on the firmware of the device that you're running, and it depends on the version of the application that's installed. So it will differ upon devices. The same thing was true on an Android. So in 585 in our capstone, you'll see we have a Samsung Galaxy S2, an iPhone 5, and an iPhone 4S. And on 2 of the devices, some of the database files for applications are encrypted, and on the other it's not. So it really is firmware dependent and application dependent. And there's no standard, unfortunately. For a file system acquisition of iOS devices, it should work on all versions of iOS. So even if you have the new iPhone 5S, as long as it's unlocked, you should be able to get a file system dump. The only difference is if DFU mode works, you can get into it. So you'll see tools come out and say, hey, we can get into the iPhone 5S, we can do this. If you look at the fine print, it's usually, it says it has to get into DFU mode and it has to be jailbroken. So if it's locked, you're going to have a very difficult time with the iPhone 4S and later. Just be aware of that. What it actually does when it gets a file system dump, it interacts with the iOS backup service. Some of the areas may be blocked and you might not get access to it. But if you look at the screenshot here, you can see the AFC service and backup service. So the AFC is Apple File Connection. This is a folder that's required by iTunes for file exchange anytime you're syncing your device. You will see in here photo data purchases, downloads, that stuff may be relevant. The backup service, this is also called AFC2 at points, but this is the area that you actually want to examine. So you'll see in here your mobile folder. That's where the user data is going to be stored. And that's what actually really matters. For your logical, same thing as Android. The main difference here is you will get email if the device is jailbroken. You may get access to more data if the device is jailbroken. I recently just examined an iPhone 4S that was jailbroken, and I had tons and tons of files to go through. Now, when I say tons, I had email addresses. I had 961,000 email addresses that NK found for me that I had to manually go through all the application folders and examine. So a device that's jailbroken might be exciting for you, but it's also a lot of work. So keep that in mind. And again, your deleted data is possible if you get access to the raw database files. Okay, how is data stored on these iOS devices? So one thing that's different from Android, there's no external storage. So everything is stored internally on the file system. It's stored in SQLite databases, which I mentioned, and property lists. So we'll discuss those. And then also consider network storage. So iCloud will contain application information. Anytime you get a new iOS device, it syncs all your application right back to your phone. So yesterday when I upgraded my phone, I didn't even have to log in again. All that data was just synced right back to my device. And then also consider applications that require network storage, such as Dropbox. So if you take 585, Dropbox is a big part of your final scenario because it's network storage that may still reside on the device in traces. So you may actually have raw files that just show network communications. Another question is, if you have access to the certificate stored on the synchronized PC, can you make a backup also in locked iOS? So excellent point there, an excellent question, Marco. Yes, you can. So if you're using a tool, so Celebrate, for example, the UFED itself, will ask you if you can essentially access the escrow files on a Mac, so, or a PC. So whatever computer you're actually syncing your device to, if you're not using iCloud, that's called the host computer. That host computer has traces of files stored in it. They're called escrow files that are in a locked folder. And what that does is actually unlock the backup so you can acquire it. So Marco, yes, that would work. The issue is not everyone has access to the host computer. That would be fantastic if you did. And you can bypass it. Most of the tools, Elcomsoft I know is another one that will ask you for it. If anyone's interested in doing iOS forensics on a Mac, there's a new course coming out. It's 518 Macintosh Forensics. Sarah Edwards is the main author. Lee Crognelli and I are helping her write it. And we will discuss in detail how to actually go in on a Mac and get those escrow files to unlock devices. So what your partitions will look like if you get a physical dump. So you're going to have your operating system partition, which Apple uses to do all your updates, and user data should not be stored there. This partition is marked read-only unless you jailbroke it, and then it's read-write, and you get access to the system partition. So then you can make changes, download applications that aren't meant for Apple, and have full access to your device. Your data partition is where all your data is going to reside and your applications. So remember the mobile folder, whether it's private mobile var, if it's just straight to the mobile, depending on your acquisition method will matter in how you get to this mobile folder. You could always search for it and it'll take you right to it. This is where your application data is going to be stored. And I'm going to go into each of them now. So I did this for Android, thought I would give you the overwhelming slide for iOS as well. Two main folders, your library and your media. Your media storing your pictures, your library storing everything else. So everything else the phone does all the databases will be stored within directories here. And this is just giving you a summary of where everything is stored that you should look for. Again, the apps are the same. Third-party apps are used to communicate. They're going to mask the data. They're going to hide themselves and not always pull themselves into the normal databases where you're used to examining. So I'm going to now discuss where to look for those. So your private mobile VAR, again, it may just be private mobile applications. Each application is stored in an application folder, and it's named according to the application identifier. So it's a 32-digit alphanumeric identifier that's assigned for an application. The issue is it's not just called Facebook. It's going to be a string of characters. However, if you know the random string of characters for Facebook, it should be the same across all iOS devices. So if you start keeping a list, or maybe we could do that as a community, this will help us in our investigations. But if you don't know, once you dig a folder deeper, which I'll show you in a few slides, it's very easy to decipher what that application belongs to. So here is how it will look. Private VAR mobile applications, you're going to have that application folder. That's the 32-digit alphanumeric string. And then within that, the main folder you need to worry about is your library folder. So this is where you're going to find your cache data, your cookies, your preferences. And your preferences may actually have login information with usernames and passwords. So make sure you actually check that. A question here. I have an iPhone image. The user forgot the password used to protect the backup in iTunes. Neither Celebrate nor Black Bag can acquire it. Suggestions. So there is an issue. The rule is once encrypted, always encrypted for a backup file unless you have the password to decrypt it. Are you using the UFED Touch to acquire this? And if so, you will have the issues. If you can use Physical Analyzer on a computer and do advanced logical, it will create an encrypted backup file for you. Or you can use XRY, and that will create an encrypted backup file for you. And then, unfortunately, you're going to have to use Elcomsoft Password Phone Breaker and crack the passcode. But once you do that, then you can actually enter the passcode into Physical Analyzer, and it will parse the data for you. So I know it's an extra hoop to jump through, but it's something you can do. And also, if you don't have Elcomsoft, you can download the demo version. And if you have the demo version, it'll show you if it can crack it right away, and then you can purchase the tool if it will work. What has been running for 2 weeks? Hopefully, you're not going to answer with Elcomsoft. And if so, there it is. Yes, Elcomsoft Password Break. It's probably, yes, Michael, my dog does have a question. I'm actually hiding in a room so he wouldn't interrupt, but he managed to do so. If Elcomsoft is still running, unfortunately, it's probably a complex passcode with upper and lowercase. And you'll notice that Elcomsoft is only going to crack lowercase unless you throw a dictionary file against it. I unfortunately had the same thing happen on an iPad where someone set a passcode that I work with and we couldn't remember it, and it ran for weeks and it never cracked it. Another question, have you ever used iPhone Backup Analyzer 2? It's an open source project. I actually tested this a little bit. I haven't had the opportunity to fully use it, but I do have access to it, and it seems like it's a great tool. Okay, can I repeat the steps one more time? Sure. So if you have a phone that was encrypted by iTunes at some point, so what will happen is the tool will tell you the backup is encrypted and it will either fail or it won't be able to continue. If you use a tool like XRY or Physical Analyzer on the computer and do logical or advanced logical acquisition, it will still create the backup file for you. The issue is it's still encrypted. So what you need to do at that point is use Elcomsoft Phone Password Breaker, load the backup file into it, hope that it cracks the passcode. If it's a simple passcode, it will crack it. If it's a complex passcode, as long as it's all lowercase, it will also crack it. If it has upper and lowercase and other characters, you'll probably need a dictionary file to crack it. Once you have it cracked, You could then open it in XRY or Physical Analyzer after you enter the passcode. And if you crack that passcode, write it down, because again, once it's encrypted, it's always encrypted. It will ask you every single time to enter that passcode. Brad, the slides aren't available yet. They won't be available until after, so you're not going to be able to download it until after the talk. What are the most common areas and folders affected by malware on both mobile operating systems? Fernando, I'm actually going to wait and continue with the slides and then answer that after, because that's a completely separate topic, if that's okay. And if there's time, I'll get to it. We do cover this in 585. Just as a short answer, most commonly, it's the SD card on Android that's affected. I have not worked an iPhone that has truly had malware on it, but I have had seen traces of spyware in the SMS messages. Another question, is the advanced logical image backup created equivalent to physical? It's not. It's more like a file system dump, so it's essentially still just doing a backup file. You can do a physical acquisition if the device is password protected, as long as it's an iPhone 4 or below. If it's not, you cannot do a physical dump. Okay, so example here on raw data to continue in the slides. For Facebook, that's what we're going to look at on iOS. So the following errors must be examined: the caches, the cookies, and the preferences. Even if your tool parses the data, you should always examine these folders to make sure it's not missing something. So here, I'm showing you up here, do you see this strand of characters? This is that 32-digit alphanumeric strand I was talking about. Instead of naming it Facebook, this is what it's called in the file system dump or physical dump. So then you have to go into the library, and you can see right underneath it says Facebook app. So you know that FEE2B8A6 continued is Facebook. Now you have the fortunate experience of going through and manually parsing all these files. So I'm going to show you what you need to look at in the next few screens. So here we're looking in the caches folder. So if you go back here, we're jumping down to caches, and we're looking at the Facebook store. So in Facebook store, in the SQLite database associated with store, you're going to see the name. This is the profile name of the user, so the person that was actually using it. So if it were my Facebook, it would say Heather Mahalik. In this instance, it says Gus Thomas. So Gus Thomas was the user, and this was his Facebook account. In the preferences, you're going to see a session plist. So this is the first time here that we're actually looking at a properly list file. If you look on the right-hand side here, so we're looking at this in raw hex, you're going to see Carrabba's Italian Grill, Fayetteville. What this was is I was Gus Thomas for dummy information for 585. I checked in at Carrabba's. So this is showing a session plist where the user actually checked in on Facebook. If you look at surrounding metadata, you would see other locations where the person checked in, and you could verify that, especially if your tool parses it, then you're able to easily identify it. If you're not, come to 585 and we will teach you how to further investigate and identify this information. A question, do application identifiers change with each new version or update of an app? Excellent question. It shouldn't, but it may depending on how the user downloads it. So if you download Facebook Messenger, that will have a different identifier than just Facebook. If you download Facebook for iPhone versus just Facebook, that may also affect it. But what I always do is I don't memorize the identifiers. I always just look one level above it. So here, I would always just go through all of them and just see and say, okay, this is Facebook. The next one's Viber. The next one's Tango. So I just do that for sanity instead of memorizing so I don't miss something. And Kevin has an excellent point. I'm not sure I admit to going to eat anywhere in Fayetteville. I completely agree. I was stuck there, Kevin. It was not by choice. Okay, so here we're now looking at the Facebook sync store database file, and this under people in the table, you're seeing a list of the friends. Now remember, friends may also be, so South Riding Inn is a location, it's a bar, that can be a friend, so something you are associated with. It doesn't have to just be a person, but you can also see their ID and their name. Sometimes the tool may only pull out the ID for you and not the name, so you have to do the association yourself. So you might want to make sure you actually go back and examine these databases. Again, if the data is deleted, you have to switch from database view into hex view and look at it manually. Here's Physical Analyzer, and I'm going to show you how it parses the Facebook data versus looking at it manually like I was just showing you. So you can see here, under installed applications, you can see Facebook. This is a great location to start your searching. So when you have a smartphone, this is an iPad in this example, but always look at the installed applications because then you know what you're dealing with. So here we can see Haywire, Facebook. We know some things that we're going to have to look. Then from there, you can actually dig into the database file. So if you look on the right-hand side here, it's going to show you the date it was purchased, the application ID. So here it's showing you Facebook is associated to this application. If you double-click on it, it should take you straight to that folder. So you don't have to manually navigate like I was just showing you. If you remember where it's stored, great. You could also do a keyword search for that FEE and that string, and it should take you right to it. Under the data files, under applications, you'll also see it here. So here, under Facebook, this is the same iPad and Physical Analyzer. It's showing you the full path. So you can go to private VAR mobile applications and straight to that folder. You're also going to see here Haywire and where to find it, Tango, Twitter, Words with Friends. So those are all ones that you'd actually want to manually examine because, again, in Words with Friends, you can chat. So you might think that's just a gaming application, but maybe someone was just chatting strictly through Words with Friends. So you need to go in and examine it. And again, remember, some of these may be encrypted. So if the data does not look right and you know you're looking in the correct database file, you can always reach out to me and ask, or you can assume that the data is encrypted. In the databases, so here, again, in this iPad, we are in Physical Analyzer. Under data files, we looked at applications. You can go to the databases, and if you know what the database name is, you can just search for it. So here, I mentioned to you the Facebook Sync Store database file that lists the person's friends. You can actually search for that and look at it directly in here. Be careful not to only examine databases you know in this structure. A good example of this would be Words with Friends, which I just mentioned a slide back. Words with Friends uses something called the chess database file, and that's where the chats are stored. Most people would never think to look for chat or SMS communication in a file called chess. So just make sure you know. Same thing, there's an SQLite database file that's associated with Viber. So if you don't know that, you do not want to be manually going through and missing something. So again, I cannot stress enough, you need to go back to the original database file in the application and examine it there. All right, so to tie this up, social networking. Sorry, there's one more question. Is there a plist or other file that will provide specific information on iCloud backup activity? The info.plist and manifest.plist file in the backup show the last time it was backed up, and it will also show the last device it was synced with. So if it were synced to a host computer, it would show you that host computer name. I have not seen where it shows you that iCloud was used. It just usually shows you the computer name. But those are two good locations to check. And again, this is covered in 518, not to keep plugging Sarah's course, but 518, the Macintosh Forensics course, this sort of thing is covered. There's a whole section on iOS artifacts recovered from computers, and that's actually covered there. Social networking. So this is something that we really highlight in 585. Chat applications that are commonly used, so free. And again, you do not need a cell phone plan to use these. So Viber, Tango, WhatsApp, Nimbuzz, Haywire, Snapchat, FaceTime, Skype. You can now just download Facebook Messenger. And then the less apparent ones, I just mentioned the Words with Friends. So again, remember, if your tool pulls out, so I don't know if you guys noticed, I'm going to go back a few slides here for a second. If you noticed here, it says chats, iMessage for SANS, FOR585, and SMS Spotlight. Just because these two chats here were used does not mean that I did not use words with friends, which I actually did in this example on purpose to show what was missed. So if you're only relying on these to be the chats, you would have missed all the chatting that was done in words with friends. There's another question. Is there a good open source alternative to Physical Analyzer? For Android, yes, you can use the Sleuth Kit and Autopsy. They work well with Android devices. For iOS, there's iExaminer, which isn't going to give you access to everything. iBackupBot, which will give you access to the raw files. It's not going to parse as much data, but as long as you know what you're doing, you don't need a tool to pull out the data for you. You can manually do it yourself. So those are just a few that could work. They're not as all-inclusive because they're not going to do acquisition and analysis and parsing for you and give you reporting like Physical Analyzer, but they are a lot cheaper, obviously. Okay, so WhatsApp. This is, oh, sorry, I just skipped a slide ahead. So an example here, a chat that was used in WhatsApp. You can see this is Physical Analyzer up here, and it's showing the chat communication. You can also look at it in conversation view by clicking this button here, which is shown on the right. So here we're showing conversation view back and forth. It is listed under the chats. So WhatsApp data was only parsed in the chat. Now is what's missing. So what did the tool miss? So WhatsApp in the chat storage SQLite. Physical Analyzer was able to grab everything from this database and show you that information in the chat parsed data. What it missed? There's a contacts.SQLite file that actually shows the status of the user. So here the person said they're sleeping. The standard one is, hey, I'm using WhatsApp now, and we'll go from there. So this is just this little example of what's missed. To show you more on what was missed, if you go into the media folder, there are pictures associated with WhatsApp. So if you're sending them back and forth, they are all stored here in different folders. So here you can see a picture of the dog that's stored in this folder, and you can also see the profile picture for the user. So Physical Analyzer actually didn't pull this out. So this is something that has to be manually done yourself. So again, remember, if it's parsing some data, it doesn't mean it's parsing it all. You may need to go through and manually look at it yourself. So a few more questions here. Can I recommend a beginner on the best way to get into smartphone forensics, where to start? So you can start by taking 585. The course actually does have really advanced topics, but it's built for everybody. We hope that even from beginner level to most advanced levels, it's built for everybody to learn something. If you have there aren't a lot of general forensic books, but the best thing I could suggest is keep taking these webinars, get some smartphones of your own, use your own smartphone and start acquiring it. You can always reach out to companies themselves, like you could call Celebrite or Teal Tech and ask them. Bill Teal, I know, gives demos of tools all the time to people to try to get into the field. So you can always reach out for free tools. But I strongly suggest do forensics on your own phone because you know how you use it, what you delete, and what's there. And that's the best way to figure out how to reverse engineer these apps, what's actually stored there, and what you should be looking for. So practice makes perfect. Another question, have I encountered any AirPrint artifacts on iOS devices like printers used in print jobs, etc.? I actually have not yet. I just started looking in iOS 7 with AirPrint artifacts. So I'm hoping to add that into 585 for the next course in March. So when I find that, I will probably do another webcast on it. So right now, Connie, I don't have answers on that. The name of Android open source programs, again, there are a lot, but I personally work for Basis Technology. I work with Brian Carrier. So Autopsy is free. And there are modules now for parsing Android devices. So it does depend on how you acquire it. If you come across an acquisition that you've done that Autopsy cannot parse, if you reach out to Brian and the team, they will work with you to add it in. So you should be able to parse. And they're also building modules now that will help parse more Android devices. So what is the difference between method 1 and method 2 for advanced logical? So Scott, on this one for method 1 and method 2, it should tell you what it gets. So method 1 is recommended and it gets more data. I believe method 2 gets a little less. I don't have it open in front of me, so I can't tell you the difference. But there is a description on the right-hand side on what it actually gets, but method 1 is preferred. In my opinion, what are the biggest challenges in forensics and incident response in mobile devices? I will say that there are so many applications out there, it's impossible for your tool to be able to get everything. It's impossible for the vendors, for us to expect the vendors to be able to do this. So the biggest challenge is manual examination and knowing how the data is stored. So where to find it and how to parse it, Fernando, is the hardest thing in my opinion. Are there forensic capabilities against Snapchat photo messages? I know Physical Analyzer will show contacts, but I'm not sure about the actual photo. John, there's actually, I believe it was, I forget which university. It's one of the online schools. Someone wrote a paper, a white paper recently on Snapchat artifacts. Again, it depends on the device and where the data is stored. We did testing on iOS devices and we weren't able to recover more than just the contacts, like you're saying. I've heard rumors on Androids that some pictures were recovered, but from what I've tested, I've not been able to recover more than just the contacts or statuses. Does the new Apple jailbreak allow for easier access to the phone? Edward, which iPhone are you referring to in this instance? And while Edward's responding, Brett asks, the question I get a lot lately about spyware. Can you tell us how to find the spyware on a phone and where to look? So for spyware and malware, again, look at the SD cards. If you're using a tool like Physical Analyzer that runs Bitdefender in it, it should parse that for you as long as you run the malware scan. You have to make sure that's up to date. For spyware, most of it I've seen in the call logs and SMS on iOS devices. And you should see traces where it's saying it's either recorded or that it's being sent somewhere else. So you're actually going to have to look at the database file itself for call logs and SMS. And then if it's an Android, look at the SD card, because most everything downloaded that's going to run application-wise in regards to malware and spyware are going to be stored on the SD card. So here is another question about using Advanced Analyzer and the backup encrypted file. Is there some way I can contact you? Yes. Email me. My email address is right here, hmahalik@basistech.com. If you have further questions and you want more step-by-step, and I'll try to answer them there. What is my tool for bypassing locked iPhones? So for locked backup files, I would say Elcomsoft works the best. Elcomsoft Phone Password Breaker, I believe it's a $130 solution. For a locked iPhone itself, I personally prefer Physical Analyzer just because I've had the best luck with it. Again, if it's iPhone 4 and below, you're golden. If it's later than that, you're going to have issues and you're going to need to get the passcode. So Edward, 4S and above. I forget your initial question. Now I have to dig back. Sorry. So does the new Apple jailbreak work for easier access to the device for 4S and above? We have gotten 4S file system dumps with the new jailbreak where the entire file system, I was amazed. That's the case I was talking about. I was amazed at the amount of data we actually got. So yes, I have seen it affected. The issue is I did not do the acquisition, so I don't believe the device was locked, but I can't be sure of that. So if it's jailbroken and then still locked, you may still have some issues, but yes, the new jailbreak does give you a vast amount of data that you would not get on a normal 4S device. Bob posted where the Snapchat paper was located, but they said they have since taken it down. What is the best way to acquire an iPhone image without Physical Analyzer? FTK Imager, maybe. John, you're not going to be able to do it with FTK Imager. You can actually use John Zdarsky's method and use DD essentially and acquire it manually using command line tools on a Mac. So if you do not have Physical Analyzer or X-Ray Exact you are going to essentially have to use a Mac to do a full acquisition. It's not as easy as just hooking it up like a hard drive and getting a dump. Is it possible to get into an iPhone 5 if it has a passcode? No, not currently, unless you get a backup file and go through those methods I talked about. But you're not going to get a file system or a physical dump unless it's jailbroken. Some more questions here. And Ben, if I'm running over, you can cut me off if I'm just trying to get through these as much as possible.
You can
okay.
If you want.
Excuse me?
So you can spend a couple more minutes if you want on the
Okay,
questions.
sorry.
That's not a problem.
Okay, I have a logical full extraction from XRY from an Android phone. Looking at the phone, I don't see the messages the XRY is reporting between the two suspects. What is the database files or file I should look for to find these? So there should be a COM Android, I think it's I don't know how you, telephony, however you want to say it, but you should see an SMS MMS database file. You should also be able to search for MMS SMS, all one word, .db, or go into the unrecognized files, which is even better, and you should see that database listed there. It should be MMS SMS, and then make sure you also examine it in hex, Ryan, to make sure you don't miss anything. And if you have more issues on that, just email me. So Andrew, I'm reading your question now. Andrew, would you mind emailing me your question so we can talk about that further? Because it's not something I think I can answer in the time frame that I have here, but I'm interested in seeing more on that one. And I think that's all for the questions. But again, if you have anything else, you can find me on Twitter. You can email me at hmahalik@basistech.com. I know this was a really quick overview, and I know that a lot of you have great questions. So please feel to reach out. Please stay tuned for more webcasts. I hope to have Cindy Murphy and Lee Cognelli do a few more on this as well. And again, as we keep developing the course, because smartphones evolve every day, we'll keep doing these to keep everyone abreast of what's going on. And we hope to see you in 585.
Thank you very much, Heather, for that great presentation and for bringing this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, visit sans.org/webcast. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.